I'm back. Welcome everyone around the world for the Ask the Howlers episode 30. We're on the VMware channel. How awesome is this? Episode 30, securing your financial data this holiday season. And yes, we are live. 6:48 p.m. here and everyone joining around the world. It's such a pleasure, of course, always to host you all again. And for those who don't know me, my name's James Aliband, Senior Security Strategist and Manager of Product Marketing at VMware. Just before we dive into the session, remember this is a cybersecurity expert roundtable where trusted advisors, I've got 3 of them today, and security strategists discuss the latest threat and security challenges, providing actionable tips, resources, and of course, most importantly, to answer your questions. Last time we were out on the VMware channel, Rick, Tom Kellerman and I, this was back in June 2021 when we're back on this channel. We're discussing the Global Threat Insights report. It's so good to be back. So just before I do introduce my guests today, I want to remind you, of course, we've got the Q&A running where you're going to be able to ask your questions live today to all of our guests, and we're going to answer a few of them later. Also, of course, my ask is when you're posting on the Q&A, tell us what country you're from. Tell us what state you're from. It's great to see everybody around the world, see all the countries' flags, who's joining the sessions, where you're listening in from. So add where you're from, which state you're from, what country you're from, and where you are in the world. So with no further ado, let's take some time and individually introduce my guests today. First off, from all the way in South California, we have our principal cybersecurity strategist here at VMware, Rick McElroy. Rick, of course, influences our VMware security strategy and discusses the VMware security strategy with CISOs around the world. And of course, I'm also proud to say, just in recent times, that Rick is also a veteran of the military after serving the Marines. Rick, thank you for being on today.
Hey, thanks for having me, James. Super happy to be here. Let's talk about some scams and frauds.
It's going to be great. Right, should we get another guest on? Let's do it. Next, we have Karen Warstell joining us from Denver, Colorado. Karen is an esteemed author of the security books, including your amazing Itty Bitty book for personal data protection. I feel like we're going to need some abstracts from that book today, Karen. And of course, Karen, you've served as a CISO for the likes of Microsoft, AT&T Wireless, and Russell Investments. Of course, today, Karen spends the time influencing CISOs around the world on topics from zero trust to stopping security operation teams from burning out. Karen, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, James, it's so great to be here. I'm really excited about our topic. I can't wait to get started.
It's going to be so much fun. And finally, we have Eric O'Neill. Eric, of course, is best known for obtaining the smoking gun, which led to the exposure and arrest of Robert Hanssen, America's first cyber spy. Today, while selling thousands of books worldwide, Grey Day, the undercover mission to expose America's first cyber spy, get your Christmas orders in. He also operates as VMware Carbon Black's national security strategist. Let's wait for Eric to jump onto the stream. There we go.
There I am. I wasn't trying to make a Hollywood entrance there. That had nothing to do with me. Great to be here, James, Karen, and Rick. Always good to be on a screen with you. And man, it's almost Black Friday, and these fraudsters are out there. The scammers are getting ready, so we need to as well.
Yep.
Exactly. It's timely to have this conversation. Well, of course, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to have you in the stream today, as I said. And of course, with our listeners know what I do. They know how I start this off. And of course, I'm going to start with an icebreaker. No surprise anymore. Let's jump around the room. Karen, I'm going to start with you. Ladies first, of course. What's the number one thing that you're looking forward to this holiday season?
Oh my gosh, I'm in Colorado. Yeah, we have mountains to get out in. And yeah, I'm so looking forward to spending as much time as I can up in the Rockies, snowshoeing and skiing this season.
Awesome. Rick, how about yourself?
You know, the McElroys are spread around the globe. Like, I don't know, we're everywhere. And so a bunch of us actually happen to be meeting up at my brother's house. So I'm super looking forward to getting to hang out with my nieces and nephews who are all super young and I don't see often enough.
Oh, that's awesome. Especially so timely as well, like after pandemic and everything like that, being able to spend time with people. Eric, how about yourself?
For me, it's just spending that quiet time with my immediate family. Last year, during the height of the pandemic, when the schools closed, my wife took my youngest two to Germany and lived there for 6 months. And my oldest stayed here with me for 6 months. So we were a split family.
Wow.
And I'm looking forward to not being that this holiday season and being together.
That's amazing. That's amazing. For myself, well, you'll see this isn't always my familiar office, as I do move into my new house in 3 weeks. So I'm super excited of spending Christmas, of course, in my new house. That's going to be pretty awesome. It's been a long wait. Let's jump in, because, of course, as we know, and our listeners know, every year, this time of year, Black Friday, Eric, you mentioned it earlier, the world flocks typically online, starting around October time, ready to spend billions and billions of dollars on food, presents, and niceties for the family, and of course for friends as well. But we all know that cyber criminals, of course, are opportunists, and the holiday period just creates massive opportunity, of course, for putting our financial data at risk. Rick, can you kick us off today? We all know that cyber criminals are opportunists, but if we dive straight in, why is the holiday season just so prevalent for attackers when they're spending their money online all year? Why is it the holiday season that makes it such a big opportunity?
Yeah, well, look, I think normally there's a scarcity that occurs with certain items, during Christmas anyway. I think when we were, kind of doing our practice run for this session, we brought up, the one off the top of my head, which is like the Furbies or Beanie Babies. I mean, we can go all the way back. Cabbage Patch Kids. When I was a kid, people were fighting in stores, and so I think under normal circumstances, you have this sense of urgency, and great parents, grandparents looking to source some items for grandkids and kids. Now compounded by a global pandemic that has also caused some massive shockwaves to our supply chain, and so now hard to get items are even harder to get, and that becomes a right playing field for these scammers, fraudsters, and criminals to take advantage of.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And Eric, do you want to jump in there? We spoke about the Furby example there, but do you think of some other examples in the sense of like why we'd be drawn and why hackers would and bad actors would just use that opportunity just to ultimately steal our data?
Yeah, precisely. There are a number of every year there are a number of unique scams that are out there. This year, I'm tracking one that the FCC has been warning about. It's tracking delivery scams. So basically, these are delivery notification scams, but they can be calls or texts, because now we do so much of our online shopping on our phones, sitting wherever we are, that the attackers have started using text. It's harder to do a lot of the diligence you need to do when you receive one of these scam emails on your phone. But if it's a text, especially if there's a link to a tracking number, and this is what we're looking at right now, we've got billions of packages that are going to move around in the next couple weeks and months. And a lot of it is being dealt with online. We're tracking our packages through text numbers and emails. And what's happened is the scammers will send you a fake tracking link, and it'll look like it comes from UPS or FedEx or whatever delivery service you want. If you click on it on your phone thinking, oh yeah, I want to see what's coming because you ordered 10 things and you're trying to manage when they're coming, it'll take you to a fake website that'll ask you to enter your personal information, and they'll steal that information that way. Or it could just start installing malware on your computer. Yep. It also gets worse. We're going to see a lot of voicemail messages or phone calls where scammers are pretending to be part of a delivery service, and they're calling to say, we had a problem with your delivery from UPS. We had a problem with your delivery from the postal service or from the post, and we need you to pay a customs fee, or we need you to pay a tax on it, or a redelivery fee, and try to get your bank account number or your credit card number so that they can charge that delivery fee, and now they've got your information. So we're going to see a lot of these scams, and we're going to see them even more at a time when the pandemic has thrust us in our homes and ordering more things online than ever before.
Yep. Yeah, and I think one of the things I just wanted to jump in and add that we are doing, like you mentioned, so many things on our phone. Cyber criminals are super smart. I mean, they actually aren't just kind of randomly sending things out, hoping that they're going to land somewhere, but they know who they're sending their things to. And we know from analyzing the cybercrime thread, that they are very targeted, very specific, and very niched in who they're going after, even after children. So if you happen to be in a certain market or you happen to be in a certain demographic, they're going to target their messages so it looks like it's tailored for you. It makes it more believable. So that, we're just at the time where we're dealing with probably lots and lots of messages. We're trying to get a lot of things done in less time. We're going to be quickly going through things, and they've essentially made the rerouting. We're so used to being redirected now. Like if we make an order from our text and we get redirected to a site, and then we get redirected to a site, they'll redirect you to a number of sites, makes it look super legitimate. And then all of a sudden, bam, they'll get you on the site where they'll either download the malware on a click, or they'll steal your information. So yeah, it's going to be really tough on people, especially on kids.
Yeah, and remember, we just talked about text and calls, and this constantly happens over email. Beware the emails you receive and clicking those links and opening those attachments. The rule of thumb is always, if you suspect anything, I mean, I never click on the links anyway, but go directly to the website. If it looks like it comes from the post office, then go to the post office and manually enter the tracking number there instead of clicking through on a link. It's just a smart thing to do now when these scams are out there.
Yeah, I love that. Like, err on the side of caution. Like if there's anything in an email that makes you nervous, don't open it. Don't click on anything. Don't reply. Just, don't just table it if you have to and come back to it later, but don't, or delete it, but don't take action on the thing, because every single time we get something from scammers, what they're trying to do is they do two things that we always fall for. They create a sense of urgency and they create a problem. And as human beings, we are wired to respond to urgency, especially if it's an emergency, right, and to try to solve a problem for somebody to be helpful. So that's why this works so often. That's why it continues to happen, because it does work, right? Very effective.
Exactly. That's one of the great examples of that we've seen a lot in the last year, more the year before, but is the police phone call. So you get a call, usually it's a grandma. They're going through social email and they're finding grandparents, and they get a call at home or on their cell phone that says so-and-so, because they've gone through your social media, they know who your grandkid's name is, is little Rick is in prison in Guatemala, or they say, they pretend they're him and say, I'm in prison in Guatemala, it's a bad connection. I just need some money so I can deal with this. They say that if I pay them a little, I can get out. Please don't tell mom and dad. And, everyone out there is probably thinking, I would never pay that, but you'd be shocked at how many people fall for it, particularly if little Rick has all this knowledge about the real person because they've gone through all the social media profiles, all the data that we just throw out there and provide for scammers to use. It's a massive wealth of it.
Yeah. Yep. What do you guys think is going to be the biggest issue going on this season? Sorry, James. I jumped right in there with a question.
No. But I actually think
you carry on.
I think one of the ones I think about is counterfeit products, right? So you're actually receiving a product that's broken, or it purports to be something on a less than optimal website, right? You purchase it, so you get a fake product, and they steal your credit card information and are able to do things with that. I also think the other prolific one we see almost annually is the publication of holiday apps that are scraping data off your phone.
Yeah.
So whether that's a Santa tracker or whatever the case may be. Look, I won't endorse any one of the major manufacturers more than another one. However, that being said, if you find that the application associated with the holidays was published in the last 2 months, maybe skip installing that on your phone and go, at least err on the side of something that's existed, that's been out there for a while, that that people have been able to test. Yeah.
One thing that happened to me.
I'm 100%.
I'm going to, okay, go ahead, James.
One that when you came to mind, Rick, it came to mind when you said about counterfeit products, and I'll take it one step further, because I actually received possibly the best text message actually over the weekend, which was we've got a potential supply chain issue with turkeys this Christmas in the UK. I came to light and I was like, okay, well, we went out and got a couple of turkeys, put them in the freezer, and then I had a text message on the weekend, order your turkeys today from this legitimate website to make sure you get them at Christmas. It takes it to one step further, because only on BBC News last week, they was talking about turkeys and talking about the fact that like the supply chain is just, and you know, Eric, you mentioned it earlier, like the supply chain is so broken. There's actually vast amount of opportunities. And like you mentioned it earlier, our grandparents could not imagine Christmas without the turkey in the middle of the table. Well, they're going to, you know, the text message is so targeted, and it, you know, it brings me to a question as well. I think that I really wanted to pick your brains all today around is like targeted campaigns typically are always so successful, and yet for me it's like they never look great. Now, okay, I'm probably savvy in the sense of being in the industry as well, but why do we think that targeted campaigns, especially when, you know, when we think about the audience as well today, why do we think that targeting campaigns are just so successful year after year after year?
Well, I think you know, one reason for that is it's generational, James. You know, previous generations were more they were just more trusting, right? And also had to retrofit their lives for technology, right? So if you took the boomers, they didn't grow up with you know, a whole lot of technology, had to adopt that. Gen X sort of was that hybrid, and then now we have what I'll refer to as like native technology generations, the millennials and Gen Z, where, you know, from a very early age it's presented to them, which does present some other interesting issues I think we'll talk about later in the broadcast. But I do think some of it's generational. And then honestly, you know, people have picked on, and you know, forgive me for using this term, but people have picked on senior citizens for a long time. Mm-hmm. There's targeted funeral scams when someone dies, and insurance scams, and all of those things. And so Eric does a great job talking about this in his talk. And if you haven't seen one of his keynotes, I would absolutely suggest that you do. But you know, to steal a little bit of his thunder, all the attackers have done is modernize their tactics using technology, right? And so it's the same thing. They're lying to you to get you to do something. They just happen to be using the tool of technology to enable that, right? And,
yeah, it's a vector to get that scam right in front of you. And what they're trying to do is, look, I often talk about cybersecurity in terms of counterintelligence, because my background is I'm a spy hunter. I used to catch spies, and now I catch cyber spies, right? And the idea is that you are fooling a person, but you're using technology as a vector to get that trick in front of the person, to get that social engineering attack in front of the person. And that's why email phishing still is the top way that most cyber attacks occur, is getting someone to click a link or open an attachment on an email that they trust. But you know, the interesting thing is many of the attacks we've talked about today already have a framework put in place. The texting scams, the email scams, as Karen said, creating a pressure situation. Actually, I'm paraphrasing a little, but I like to say that, you know, don't examine your security in a pressure situation. They want to create that sense of urgency, which is what Karen said and is completely correct. That sense that I can't take the time to relax about this. If I don't do this, something bad is going to happen. I'm going to have to pay, you know, $480 for an ab roller I didn't order. Or what was happening last year, the biggest scam last year was get in line for your COVID shot. Get in line for a antibody test was the first thing before we knew anything about COVID. The government is going to have antibody tests. Here's where you can register. And then you go to the registration site, and of course you're putting in your social security number, you're putting in a credit card. We're just going to put a hold for the ultimate payment. And people were doing this because they were afraid of the disease. And they felt like, if I don't do this right away, if I take the time to think, then I'm not going to be getting a spot to get something that I need for my health. And that's what the scammers are looking at. They want to put you in that moment where you just, if you had the time to take 5 minutes to look at the spelling mistakes, the grammar mistakes, or the blurry logo, maybe you would think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. But if they can trick you, if they can get you to feel like if you're going to miss out on something, or something's going to cost you a lot of money if you don't do it, people do it. And it turns out that statistically, 25% of people, no matter how good their training is, click on those links.
I want to key off something you just said there, because the mistakes, the spelling mistakes and everything in those emails. And we think, how stupid, how could somebody send those out? Like the Nigerian prince emails that have been around forever. They're still around because they work. Right. And here's something I learned about this in marketing training. And that is Nigerian prince emails are not actually a mistake or sloppy. They are very intentionally crafted to target a very narrow niche of people who are careless about details and greedy.
Yeah.
And that's their niche. And that's the people who click on the link, right? So it's still, you might not do anything for you, but it's definitely going to hit a group of people that fit that profile. So yeah, there's these things are carefully crafted, and there's been times, maybe you haven't ever clicked on one of those links, Eric, but I have, and it's like what? Like,
oh yes,
right? And
I have
the sandbox, of course.
Believe me, I have, and then the second you do it, you realize, oh crap, and now you're going through and changing all your passwords and scrubbing your computer and right.
Yeah.
I think you brought up a good point, Karen, around greed, because I think that's the other lever they pull, right? So you'll start to see more and more of these show up, whether they're on social media groups or some sweepstakes offer. So again, going back to common sense, because a lot of compute and interactions, common sense. If it seems too good to be true, if you think you're going to be the one human on the planet that gets Oculus Rift when no one else is, it's probably not going to happen. And you're entering all this information, right? And so again, I think be realistic this year. There's going to be shortages all over the place. Maybe talk to your people. Maybe it's a gift-free year. I don't know what the case may be for your family, but I think if you think you can get to the front of the line on something, there's a good chance you're probably being scammed.
Yep, definitely.
I'm taking a segue in that because I know, for our listeners, especially being on the VMware channel, Eric, I wanted to pick your brains a little bit around the dark web and kind of really digging in. Like, let's give a real overview. Like, what is the dark web? We hear about this thing. We hear about the dark web. What actually is it?
Certainly. Well, the dark web's an interesting place, and I know, and Rick's got to jump in too. I know he's done a lot of research in there. It doesn't exist in a physical space. There's no land, there's no property, there's no brick and mortar store for the dark web. You can't go into a store in some back alley and say, hey, I'd like to buy a kidney. But you can on the dark web. You can buy virtually anything there from a attacker for hire. And in the beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing a lot of schools get taken down by denial of service attacks and ransomware attacks, and trace back to some kid who decided they didn't want to take their test that morning, so had their school Zoom bombed or their school taken down, their network taken down, so they couldn't do Zoom learning. Everything from that to custom malware, malicious software that is built for ransomware. There's complete business verticals, from developers to distributors to customer support and service to an entire financial infrastructure to collect money in cryptocurrency and get it in the hands of everyone who works through these verticals. And to get to it, you have to have a particular browser, a little bit of know-how, but virtually anyone can find themselves there if they want to. The interesting thing about the dark web, and one thing I can say is it's led to this massive epidemic or pandemic, if you will, of ransomware we've been suffering the last number of years. It's incredibly lucrative. It has made fortunes for criminals. And it's now, according to the World Economic Forum, the third largest economy on earth. So let that sink in, right? It still goes to the US and then China, and those two are sort of on top and bouncing. US has stayed on top, good for us. But it goes US, China, dark web, right? Not the UK where you are, James, not any other country. The dark web is the third biggest economy on earth, and that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, and I always like when scammers scam scammers. So don't think that they don't do this activity to each other as well. Yeah. One of the ones that I've tracked for a few years is, like, if you go on the dark web, you'll start to see marketing campaigns around tumbling and cleaning your Bitcoins that are, you've gotten through ransoming or some other illicit means. Or you'll see hey, if you give us X number of cryptocurrency in this form, we'll give you, Bitcoin. So again, like scammers are going to scam, and that's what they do. But yeah, there's a lot of scams around actually trying to tumble your money and hide it from law enforcement as well.
Right. I mean, if the dark web wasn't a place where, it's also a place where many of the criminals are learning. They can learn from each other. They can buy attacks from each other, entire attack toolkits from each other. Someone will develop it and just wants to sell it somewhere for others to actually launch the attacks, because then they don't have to deal with collecting the money and trying to move it through crypto wallets fast enough that the FBI doesn't track them down. So it leads to further cyber attacks. And, the interesting thing is, this is despite the fact that I think half the people on there are criminals and the other half are security or law enforcement trying to catch them. And Interpol with US Cyber Command has been very successful in recent months in capturing some of the most prolific cyber attackers, but it continues. And I think that the old statistics were that the cost of cyber crime by the end of this year, we're almost there, will be $6 trillion. And we're going to exceed that amount, right? That was an old prediction a few years ago. If you take that out the next 5 years, it will easily double. So in 5 years from now, it'll be over $12 trillion. And that's a lot of money that could be spent in better places, especially during a time when we're in the middle of a global crisis.
Could I just bring something up really quick in case there's anybody watching and listening that is thinking that it might be kind of a cool thing to go take a look at the dark web? Like, even if you assemble all the tools, and you get a throwaway computer, maybe, or not, just don't do it.
Yeah.
Like,
just don't do it.
It's going to invite so much pain and trouble into your life by getting started there, because I can tell you from the experience we had when we were monitoring a group of people that were planning to do an attack in Seattle, several years ago, we were watching them. They were watching us watch them. We were watching them watch us watch them. Yeah. Like, this go back and forth. You're not ever going to be surreptitiously browsing through the dark web. So just don't do it.
And I think to add to that as well, it's, Eric, when you said about like this, it got me thinking like Cybercriminal Academy, in the kind of in the dark web, but like, but jokes aside, in that sense, like I always kind of try to relate to it as well. I think, Karen, you make a really, really strong and good point, and I want to emphasize that is that think about like, physically, you wouldn't go and think about joining a gang. I really hope our audience isn't going to like join a gang, like a physical gang, right? Because you know what the mentality is like, and yes, it is like the films. Unfortunately, like once you're in, it's extremely hard to get out as well. And I want to make that, emphasis, like, don't go in the first place. There's a lot of good that can be done by being out. And that, really to be clear on that. Karen, just bringing you back in as well here, because I think we've got like kind of the emphasis of like the dangers around the holiday season. And, ultimately, like, we'll talk about the top tips. We'll talk about what people should do. But like, let's think about like, okay, the worst has happened. Right. Someone's clicked on a link on a text message. They go, oh, crap, like I've clicked on a link. What should they do next? Like, what's the practical advice that we can give them from there that they should do next?
Well, one thing I recommend that everybody does is that they monitor, or they set themselves up to have monitoring for free with a group called or a website called Have I Been Pawned? And we can put the link in somewhere in the notes so people can see that. Because I get notified from them the second that my email and maybe my password goes on up for sale. So as soon as that happens, or as soon as somebody has a breach and my stuff is disclosed, I get notified. I get notified way before, any of the other services that you pay for will tell me. So I would suggest that everybody do that right now. And that way, at least you have the notification. I have a set of things that I really recommend people do, because if you're like me and you lose your social security number, like I did in 2002, you want to be sure that you have documentation and things so that you can quickly move through the financial system, talk to banks, talk to the Social Security Administration, or anywhere where you have a government, a national identity number or card or anything like that. You want to be able to be prepared. Yeah, because you're going to need, if you do have a compromise and someone does pick up your data, they're going to be imitating you. I have a person, his name is Domingo Rodriguez, and he pops up as me all over the place in my life. And every now and then it's a very surprising letter I get from somebody telling them how I owe them money. So you just want to be prepared for that. And it's going to happen to a lot of people. I mean, ever since Equifax had half of the United States population lose every single kind of sensitive information that they possibly could in a breach, it happens. It happens. The government's lost our info. The credit card companies, everybody's losing your info. So just kind of assume that it's out there. That's the best thing you can do, and get prepared to deal with it when you do become aware of it.
It's an awesome comment that just got left as well. I just wanted to bring this up because when we're thinking about fake websites, fake emails, just remember as well, and I'm kind of saying this to the audience, but I think it's such a good point that, these holiday websites and get the latest PlayStation, get the latest Xbox or whatever, they have real PayPal buttons on there. They have real trademark copied and pasted at the bottom. They're really made to mimic. With you click on the PayPal button, it takes you to PayPal and so on and so forth. And think about again the time and the engineering that goes into making sure that we're actually we're getting fooled by this. We ultimately getting fooled. But that one link, and it goes back to exactly what Eric said earlier. That one link can kill you in that sense, in the non-literal term. But that link, just go to the website, go to the actual website, search for it yourself, see what the stock levels are. Let's think about protecting ourselves now, team. Let's think about protecting ourselves. We've probably scared the audience enough today, and we probably don't want to do that anymore. It's holiday season, but Black Friday's coming up, so we're hoping that we're getting ahead of the time. We've got a few people joining us today. Let's go around. Let's think about how can people protect themselves? What's some simple things we can do? Some simple things that we can take forward. Nothing is complicated. I don't mind who wants to kick this off, by the way, but whoever wants to kick this off, simple things we can do from now.
I'll take the easy one first. Passwords and multi-factor authentication. Now, what is, that's a big $64 word, right? What does that mean? It just means that you're not just using a password to log into things, but you have a second thing that you use, whether it's a text message to your phone or a token or something that comes back and says, are you really who you say you are? So make sure every time you have an opportunity to set that up that you do, because it's going to thwart so many of these attacks that try to come in and steal your information. So I would go for that. And for the passwords that you do use, make sure they're really, really good. I like to always use, a password. I have a password algorithm that I use that is always what I use when I have to invent a new password, or I have Google do it for me. But and I'm not going to say what it is on the air.
Yeah, don't do that.
But I would find your little formula of substitutions that you use for certain things. It's like a little substitution cipher, and use that for creating your long passwords. And I'll tell you, make it a complex password, and don't make it like 6 characters or even 8 characters. Make it really long, like a passphrase, because we did a little experiment here with a bank grade secure password that was 16 characters long, and we broke it in 24 hours. So yeah, make it complex, make it long, and make it yours. Don't share it with anybody else.
Yeah, passwords are horrible. Passwords are useless. Passwords don't work. Here's the problem with passwords, and I constantly in my talks denigrate the password. Don't like it. Think we need to get rid of them. Think we need something better.
True. If
you don't have I want to follow up something Karen said. If you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on for your most critical accounts, every email account, every bank account, everything that matters to you, think of it as all the things that you lost in your wallet If, and all the work you have to do when you lose your wallet, even if no one has it, you just can't find it. You have to call all the credit card companies. You have to get a new driver's license. You have to worry someone might have your driver's license. All those accounts you have online that matter to you. If you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on, you're going to be in trouble. And here's why. People tend to reuse their passwords. Karen said, use multiple passwords, come up with an algorithm, use a password manager, something that has distinct different passwords for everything, because you will lose your username and password in a breach. They're all there for sale on the dark web. Hundreds and hundreds, millions of them are there. Username special. The website, Have I Been Pwned, is great because you can check and see if your email address is in there, and they'll show you your password that's for sale on the dark web. I just want to tell one story about a big ransomware attack that you may have heard of with Colonial Pipeline. It happened in May of 2021. This was the big company that moves gasoline from the West Coast to the East Coast of the United States. They were hit by a massive ransomware attack where they had to shut down their operations for a few weeks. Gasoline couldn't move across the United States. Here in the East Coast, we couldn't fill up our cars in the pump. It was only a few weeks, but people panicked. You might have heard silly stories on the news about people filling up trash bags full of gasoline because they were in that pressure situation. They were panicking. There was chaos. The way the attackers got in is by buying a user account, a remote access account that the company had from the dark web. Probably cost them 20 cents total for the username and password. That is how they got in. And they demanded a $4.4 million ransom for that 20-cent investment. The username and password did not have a multi-factor authentication turned on for it. So all they had to do is buy it from the dark web, type it in, and they were in. And so we have to be extremely careful. We need to take care that we're adding that second layer of protection. In the future, I think we won't have passwords. I think we'll have something else. And, and you can also use not just the text that comes to your phone, but these great authenticator apps that you install on your phone. Everybody admit it, you're never away from your phone ever. It's always there, so you can always use it to log in when you have to. And that's what I think the future is going to be.
And those authenticator apps, they're not that hard to use. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure, you might be thinking this sounds really onerous and difficult. Get someone to help you. If you don't know how to set it up on your phone, get someone to help you. It's actually not that hard. And using it, I use Authenticator for a whole bunch of things. And I love it. So it's an easy thing.
Yeah, I agree, Karen. I think that's an area that InfoSec has shined over the last 10 years, is making crypto easier to use and understand. It was, if you remember all the way back to the PGP days, right? It was onerous, and people were like, I don't understand it now.
Pretty good protection. Yeah,
it's point and click. I would say, here's pieces of advice I give people around me, not in a corporate setting. Number one, probably from a personal perspective, it makes no sense to allow anyone to hit your credit. So you can turn that off through any of the major services, turn that on when you actually need to, get new credit. So I think that's pretty good preventative control. And then I would highly recommend that if you have access to them and can use them, use an iPad versus a Windows box with a good VPN installed. If you're really paranoid, reboot that iPad once a week, because as far as we know, the advanced persistent threat actors can't gain persistence on a Mac OS system.
Right.
So if you reboot, you actually boot out the rootkit that's installed already, and you kind of have a clean system. So I do say to people who have the choice between a MacBook and a Windows box, there's just more stuff that runs on Windows today, right? So it's not a condemnation of anything. It's just, if I had to measure per volume of things, I'm going to skate to an operating system that has less things that are a threat to it. And then I think VPN is just a solid usage for anybody out there. We know advanced groups and non-advanced groups are targeting home networks. The pandemic's really highlighted that since it's all part of our business network now. So definitely on your personal devices, get a VPN and MFA.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and if you've had Comcast come and install your router or any of your service providers for internet, make sure you have somebody show you how to go in and change the admin password on your router, because they set it up with a default that's published on the web and everybody knows it. So
exactly. Hey, be careful. routers are interesting. Be careful when you are, this is one that just popped in my head, but there was a great story. Be careful when you are accessing routers that are free, public routers that are free, right? Yes. So there was this story a few years ago about a very famous coffee shop. We don't need to name names. It wasn't their fault anyway, but they were getting a lot of the people going into that shop were getting their identity stolen and massive credit card bills. And so they went after the servers thinking that maybe they were taking pictures. This is what will happen sometimes is someone will, for example, if you leave your purse or your backpack and you run to the bathroom, someone can go in your bag and take a picture of your credit card and the back with the code. And now they're going to start charging things on it. So they thought maybe it was sort of server fraud, but it wasn't. What had happened was the coffee shop was up against an apartment building, and the guy who shared the wall with it put his own router on the wall, named it the name of that coffee shop, and made it open. And people were connecting to his router that he controlled, right? And he was capturing all their transactions. Yeah. So you do have to be careful. That's why, like Rick said, using a VPN can protect you from those sort of things. He can't capture your traffic if it's going through an encrypted VPN. So always use one of those if you're going to a public router.
Yeah, well, and hotel, coffee shop.
Oh yeah, hotels,
airport. Like, just don't use it unless you have, that you have the right security things in place on your machine, like a VPN, to protect you and a firewall, and that your operating system is up to date and patched.
Yeah. We can open a can of worms now, can't we, on that one? And do you know what? Just like really simple things as well. And I had the joy of being on the train this morning. So 6:55 on my way to London, and I went to the toilet, went to the restroom, and looked to my left, and somebody's laptop had been left there, not locked, completely open. Yeah. And you just look at it and you go, and like my instant thought is like, oh my days, like come on, like this is, and again, like really simple things. You're gonna walk away from your laptop, lock it.
Yeah,
just lock it. At least you put in a.
That's like the modern example of you're through the parking lot and you see someone who left their lights on. You go try and see if you can open their door and turn their lights off. Somebody leaves their laptop like that. You just sort of close the clamshell, help them out a little.
Change
the background on their desktop. See when they notice.
I have a confession. Once my manager, when I was in the research group, they left their Unix machine open when they left the office for lunch. They didn't shut it down or lock it. And we went in and we installed Ren and Stimpy sound files.
Oh, that's awesome. I love
so that. every time they opened a shell, it's like, you idiot, you filthy worm.
That is so great.
So you could do that before you close the clamshell.
Yeah, these are
conversation yesterday.
Yeah, these are simple tricks, but I mean, they have massive ramifications. I'll take you back to 2016 when the United States was in the middle of that election attack, where staffers all over the place were being compromised by intelligence services. One of the ways that a foreign intelligence service was able to gain access to staffers' accounts who had good cybersecurity and were being very careful was to surveil them, follow them. And when they went to a hotel, they set up at the hotel and compromised the hotel's network. Yeah. And so when the staffers went into the hotel and then accessed the hotel's free Wi-Fi, they were able to compromise them that way. So attackers will find ways to get to you, but there are things that you can do to make it very hard for them.
And it flips the narrative, doesn't it? It's really kind of, we're driving into a world now where we all have a security responsibility. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter where you are and take that responsibility on you, take that emphasis on you, whether it's your corporate device, whether it's your personal device, whether you're using an iPad, whether you're using a Windows device, whatever, it doesn't really matter in that sense. I think the narrative here, and I think the biggest take home from all of this is take that responsibility. You've got it within yourself to take that responsibility. It's really simple things. And kind of sitting here going, well, there's really simple things, because actually these attacks sometimes are really simple. We get caught out. Karen, you said it earlier, like these attacks are so simple. They're rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And guess what? They catch people out every single year. You know, and that's the point. Take it upon ourselves. And if that's my take-home message from that today is take it upon yourself. Listen to the advice. Do the really simple things. Lock your device. Use a VPN. You know, make sure that you're not clicking on links, and you should, check the email address. If it's got Amazon 321, probably not legitimate. All of these things, which are really, really, really useful points. Let's go around the room. Let's do one top tip to protect ourselves in the holiday season. Then we'll wrap this thing up. Eric, do you want to go first?
Sure, I will go first. I think I want to go back to something that happened to my wife and I during the holiday season. And this is stepping away for cyber for just a minute. And I want to follow up on something I said. You know, you have to take care of your physical assets as well. Don't leave that laptop open. Don't leave your backpack with your wallet in it on a table while you run to the bathroom in a coffee shop or in an airport. This happened. No, it probably wasn't me, but I'm not going to say who, but it happened to us. Somebody apparently went in, took the driver's license and credit card, copied them. And the next thing we knew, we had a bill for $10,000 from a little bed and breakfast outside of London, where they charged 3 different charges on the credit card because, you know, we have our limit set so that you can't charge X amount just so this can't happen. And they did it 3 times. The bed and breakfast, you know, to their horror, accepted it. And when I called my bank and said, this wasn't us, we weren't in London, you know, the fraud alert, the scammers got away with the money. They got stuck with the bill. I actually called the bed and breakfast to ask how it happened. The scammers had sold the information to a fake travel agency who arranged a country, evening out and breakfast and a tour of the countryside, all inclusive for some travelers who went and stayed at the bed and breakfast, had nothing to do with it, thought they were dealing with a legit travel agency, but they were dealing with someone who stole credit cards and then used them to set this all up, charged it all to the bed and breakfast who ended up getting stuck with the costs and couldn't afford it. So you have to be extremely careful about where you leave your stuff. That it's not just the cyber spies and criminals out there. It is the real criminals. They're all real criminals, but the physical criminals who would love to get their hands on it.
They certainly still exist.
Especially
James, I think you brought up an excellent point about responsibility, right? I have a responsibility when I turn the ignition on in my car and take that out into a public street, into a public freeway. We teach classes around defensive driving, right? I know that when I was teaching my son to drive, I certainly imparted that there's a lot of threats intrinsic to your safety and health and life, and you got to take that seriously, right? So telling our kids things like don't text. So I think a lot of the prescriptive things that we're telling people are fairly simple. Right? Setting up a VPN, fairly simple. I think most people can walk through that. MFA. I've certainly got my mother-in-law who's 80 years old attached to MFA. It's great. She has less questions about when she buys a consumer device and brings it into the house. So I do think defensive driving for technology is needed. But again, I'm going to go back to install a VPN. Now, I won't recommend any one particular one. Go do some research. Consumer Reports has a good 5-star rating for those. But pick one and protect your network traffic at least.
Yeah, and a lot of the companies that you might be using for your cybersecurity, a lot of the big companies will give you a free one.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a great point, Eric. Great point. Karen?
So I would say the number one thing I hear from people is who would want my data? Who would want to target me? I'm just nobody. So why would that happen? And I will tell you a really short story. When I was in grad school, I was finishing my master's thesis. My husband had taken the children to the grandparents for a weekend. And I went across the street to borrow the neighbor's printer so that I could transcribe all of my files and get them printed for my thesis because it was finally finished. And the computer where I had done all of the work was still running back in my house. And as I was in the yard across the street, I heard the door be broken in on my house, like this crash. I didn't realize at the time what it was, but it was thieves had busted down the door and cleaned out every electronic, including my running computer, and taken it with them, which had my master's thesis on it.
I know, I was going to say, did you have that backed up?
I had the only known copy of it was on this drive, this floppy drive that I was taking across the street to get printed.
Okay,
and so
you had that.
I still graduated. But what I want to tell you is make a backup, go to Costco or go to your local discount store, wherever you need to go, order it online and get one of those like 1 terabyte drives that you can plug into your computer and get a backup of everything. It's going to help you in case you get hit with ransomware.
Yeah.
Keep that backup offline so that it won't get contaminated, and just use your periodic backups to update it. But yeah, a backup is going to be invaluable to you because you never know when you're going to get hit. And believe me, it's indiscriminate. Nobody's going after just certain sets of people. They're going after any opportunity. And whether it's a physical home break-in or whether it's a digital break-in, you're as likely as the next person to be a target. So do what you can. And also make sure you go out to Amazon. You can get a copy of my amazing itty bitty book on personal data protection. And it's free if you get the Kindle version. So download that and use the tips in there to help you.
I'm gonna wrap it up with this one, and definitely download that book. By the way, I did it earlier just before the stream, and that's my holiday reading material. First one, personal experience today: lock your device. If you don't lock your device, set it to lock, automatic, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. The amount of people who are traveling, leave their device on the table, go to the restroom, get your device to lock automatically. Super cool tip. That's the first one. If you can, don't use your debit card on your line. Use a credit card. A little bit safer in that perspective, if you can. I always think that debit card, pay the bills from there. Salary goes into there. Credit card probably doesn't have your salary coming out of there. Little things that you can do just to. So that's probably my top tip. Don't use your debit card this Christmas if possible. I appreciate not everyone can, but if possible, don't use your debit card. Try to use your credit card. Maybe get some points as well if you spend. It's even better. There's a bonus in that sense. But I think that's also another one that's there. Look, we've taken up 52 minutes of people's mornings, afternoons, evenings. This has been awesome. Thank you, everyone around the world, as always, for joining these sessions. Rick, you absolutely did a smashing session last time. This has been awesome. We've got one more session coming up on the VMware Carbon Black LinkedIn. If you don't follow the VMware Carbon Black LinkedIn, search it, VMware Carbon Black, follow the LinkedIn, follow the Twitter channel as well. You'll hear from Eric, from myself, from Rick, from Karen, of course, from Tom Kellerman as well, and the Howlers, and also other people on those channels. If you want to get security tips, security information, the conversations that we're having with the with CISOs, there's some awesome information. Also, I'm going to take this tag as well. There's some great keynotes from all of these people on this screen. Search us on YouTube. With some really cool information. Remember to download Karen's book. Remember to order Eric's book for Christmas as well.
Awesome.
Rick, I need you to release a book next year. That's the next one.
I'm the only one. I'm slacking.
No, and me. But with that, it's been an absolute pleasure hosting this. It's been absolutely awesome. Thank you, everyone, for providing your insightful tips. They're super useful tips, super simple tips. MFA, VPN, don't use a debit card, lock your screen. But with that, wherever you are, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Take care, everyone. Take care. See you soon. Have a great Christmas. Have a great holiday.
Goodbye.
Happy holidays.